It's a great question because people will see the title, which is Fuck Content Marketing, and they will think that it has everything to do with content marketing in a part of marketing where we actually have a job title called content marketer. And a lot of my team was very concerned that the content marketer would, first of all, be the one to read this, and second, would be highly insulted. So let me clear out that this is not about saying that content marketers are terrible. In fact, I think they're extremely gifted. I think the idea of the book was more so that there's no point in creating all that content if the rest of the organization is not going to leverage it. And it's interesting if you look over the last 10 years, just getting to the point where we are today with how easily we can create content, even like this video that will be edited and produced, for your audience. We weren't at that comfort level 10 years ago. We've gotten there. The question though is, how are you going to leverage that content? Because if as much of it goes unused, as analysts like Serious Decisions say, they say 70% unused, well then what's the point of having put all that effort into the upfront part? Absolutely. So a big part of the book is unpacking a framework. I promise people who decide to tune in, it is not a textbook framework. It's more of a practitioner's framework. How do I actually go as a marketer and think about creating these personalized experiences at scale? So it's 5 steps that I walk people through. The first is to centralize your content. So that idea is really pulling together all the various feeds of content you have. It could be, as we said, blog posts, ebooks, videos, various formats. The second step, once we have an accounting of all that content, we have to start to organize it better. So that's the back end things that we do to tag content, not just from an SEO perspective, but also how do we find the content, right? Like we have all this content in our organization and some of us just showed up into that company 3 months ago. How do I go and find the right assets for my persona that may have been crafted a year ago and are still relevant? So that's step 2. Then the fun starts. That's step 3. Step 3 is about personalization. It's taking that tagging and being able to search and pull together the right resources that your audience needs to buy from you in that moment. Once we have those pulled together, then we can start to think about how we distribute, how we engage our audience at the end of the day. But there's no point in doing that and sending them back to this massive repository with so many different pieces of content. When we do those 4 steps, we get to the 5th one is we start to see results. Now, results for a marketer usually means we're generating leads, we're generating engagement, perhaps even pushing someone over that revenue line. The first thing to keep in mind is this, what I hit on in this book is more about what to do once you've created content. If you're still at that stage of trying to figure out how to create better content, like write better content, I would take a look at, someone like Ann Handley has a great book called Everybody Writes. It really digs into how to create compelling content that your audience is going to want to read. Once you have that content though, the whole idea of this is, how do I start to think about personalizing? Now, I would suggest that every company, no matter what stage that they're at, should be thinking about that. The reality though is just how many different personas or how many different audiences can we personalize to, depending on our scale. Now, you look at a company as big as, say, Microsoft. Now, Microsoft has so many different segments and so many different geographies buying different products that they're going to sell to. If you're a small business, you will just have to think about who is the most likely to buy from me and how do I personalize to get their attention right now. What we'll do is we'll actually make sure that we take content that's very well geared to, say, a demand generation marketer and make sure that we put that content in front of them. And similarly, we have a persona that may be more in content marketing. They still are involved in that buying process with us. Even though they may not be the champion, we have to give them content to get them on side. So, personalizing content by persona is one way to do it. Another example, a customer that we work with called Snowflake, they're down to the level of account-based marketing. And account-based marketing is this idea of how do I personalize down to the individual customer or account that I'm trying to sell to. And in that way, we can start to do things like having a the logo of the customer on the page that we direct them to. We pick content that gears around their industry or their vertical. And to some degree, in some cases, we may even create net new content for that audience, but I'll caution you that's not always needed. Technology is in place today to allow us to know a lot about people the moment they come to our website, they engage with us the first time. Even if they haven't put up their hand and said, here's my contact details, we can get third-party intent data and we can personalize based on that by understanding what they're trending on, what they're searching on, as long as they're doing that. Now, we have to remember that with that, if you will, with that data comes a lot of responsibility. We need to make sure that we don't abuse it, but rather that we add value back in return. Now, to answer your other question, how do we engage them in a way that is more personalized? That's where, there's this need for marketing operations that's, helping to build an understanding of our contacts and a database and leveraging that so that every distribution point that we have starts to feel more personalized. And there's a lot of there's a lot of technology out there today that goes beyond even Uberflip to get into things like, okay, if I'm going to send you a retargeted ad, because you visited my site, now you're on Instagram or you're on Google, and I can put an ad that ties back to the fact that you came to visit me. Now, my ability to do so and drop in something as simple as your name or your company's logo into the advertisement will increase the likelihood for it to capture your attention. The key, though, is that once you click on that ad or once you open the email and you click through, that the destination is just as customized. And that's where it comes down to pulling together the right content assets. Best place to go would be, start at uberflip.com. We've got a really fun video that we had a little fun with what we do by explaining it to people like there's, something as simple as a 5-year-old, no offense, but really, dumbing this down. And that'll send you on a journey. Beyond there, we've got a lot of content organized by different challenges that you may have, which is everything we've been talking about today. You can check that out at hub.uberflip.com.